The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet Montana evening as Abigail Winters huddled in the corner of her father's dusty general store, trying to make herself invisible. At 22, she had spent most of her life being told she was nothing worthless, and tonight was no different as her drunken father hurled both insults and inventory across the wooden floor of their failing business. "You'll never amount to anything," he bellowed, his words slurred and bitter. "Just like your mother, weak, useless." Abigail's hands trembled as she pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. The year was 1878, and Whitehorn, Montana, was as unforgiving as the man who had raised her. Her mother had died when she was just 8 years old, leaving her at the mercy of a father who blamed her for everything from his failed business ventures to the harsh reality of frontier life. "Clean this up," he growled, gesturing wildly at the broken glass and spilled goods before staggering toward the door. "I'll be at the saloon. Don't wait up." The bell above the door jangled as he left, and Abigail released the breath she'd been holding. Slowly, she rose from her hiding place and surveyed the damage. Merchandise lay scattered across the floor: canned goods, fabric, and a small barrel of nails that had spilled its contents like metal raindrops across the worn planks. She knelt to pick up the pieces, ignoring the stinging in her palms as tiny shards of glass embedded themselves in her skin. This was her life, always picking up the pieces, always being reminded of her worthlessness. She had never known kindness from a man, had never expected it, and had long ago stopped dreaming of it. As Abigail worked, the setting sun cast long shadows through the store's dusty windows. Across the street, the Silver Dollar Saloon was coming alive with piano music and raucous laughter. Her father would be there until the early hours, drinking away what little profit the store had made. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Abigail had been up since before sunrise, baking bread to sell at the store. The smell of fresh loaves filled the small back room that served as their kitchen, a comforting contrast to the tension that lingered in the air. Her father had not returned home the previous night, not unusual after one of his drinking sprees. He would stumble in eventually, smelling of whiskey and regret, demanding breakfast and dispensing blame. The bell above the store door rang, startling Abigail from her thoughts. It was too early for customers, and dread filled her stomach as she prepared to face her father's wrath. Instead, she was greeted by Sheriff Miller, his weathered face grim beneath his gray mustache. "Miss Winters," he said, removing his hat respectfully, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Abigail's hands stilled on the dough she had been kneading. "What is it, Sheriff?" "It's your father, miss. There was a fight at the saloon last night. Cards, accusations of cheating." He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry to tell you that he didn't make it." The world seemed to tilt beneath Abigail's feet. Not from grief, she had mourned the father she might have had years ago, but from the sudden, terrifying uncertainty of her future. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Well, that's the other matter I need to discuss with you," Sheriff Miller said, his expression growing more troubled. "Your father had debts, Miss Winters, quite substantial ones. The store, the inventory, it all belongs to Mr. Hargrove at the bank now. Everything." Her voice was barely audible. "I'm afraid so. He's giving you until the end of the week to vacate the premises." After the sheriff left, Abigail stood motionless in the middle of the store. At 22 years old, she was alone in the world with no family, no home, and no prospects. The weight of her father's final legacy, confirmation of her worthlessness, settled over her like a shroud. For 3 days, Abigail moved through her tasks like a ghost. She helped prepare her father's body for burial, stood alone at his sparsely attended funeral, and packed her meager belongings. The townspeople, while not unkind, kept their distance. Her father had made few friends and many enemies during his years in Whitehorn. On the evening of the third day, Mr. Hargrove from the bank paid her a visit. He was a portly man with small, calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Miss Winters," he said, looking around the store with obvious satisfaction. "I trust you've made arrangements." Abigail nodded stiffly. "I'll be gone by tomorrow as requested." "Good, good." He stepped closer, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "You know, a young woman alone faces many challenges on the frontier. I might be persuaded to offer you a position in my household. My wife could use the help, and you would have a roof over your head." The implication in his tone made Abigail's stomach turn. She had seen the way Mr. Hargrove looked at the young women in town, had heard whispers about his household help from the ladies at church. "Thank you for your offer, Mr. Hargrove, but I have other arrangements," she lied, forcing her voice to remain steady. His smile tightened. "Do you? How fortunate. Well, should those arrangements fall through, my offer stands for the time being." He tipped his hat and left, the bell jangling ominously in his wake. Abigail sank onto a crate, her composure finally breaking. She had no arrangements, no plan, and nowhere to go. The little money she had saved over the years would barely last a month, even if she could find lodging in town, which was unlikely given her father's reputation. As night fell, she curled up on her narrow bed for the last time, staring at the ceiling and wondering what her mother would have done in her place. Sleep eluded her as possibilities each more desperate than the last raced through her mind. Morning came too quickly. Abigail packed her final possessions, a few dresses, her mother's Bible, and a small portrait of her parents from happier times into a worn carpet bag. With one last look at the only home she had ever known, she stepped out onto the street. The town of Whitehorn was already bustling with morning activity. Wagons rumbled past, merchants arranged their wares, and children darted between buildings on their way to the schoolhouse. No one paid much attention to the slender young woman standing uncertainly outside the general store, her life's belongings clutched in one hand. Abigail walked aimlessly, following the main street toward the edge of town. She had no destination in mind, simply a need to put distance between herself and the store that was no longer hers. The weight of her situation pressed down on her with each step. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, worthless, useless, nothing. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the commotion ahead until she was almost upon it. A crowd had gathered around the livery stable, where a magnificent black stallion was rearing and bucking, fighting against the restraints holding it. "That devil's gonna kill someone," shouted the livery owner, backing away from the powerful animal. "I told you he wasn't broke proper," said another man, shaking his head. "Wild as the day he was born." Abigail paused, momentarily distracted from her troubles. The horse was beautiful, a gleaming black coat and powerful muscles that spoke of speed and strength. There was something in its wild resistance that resonated with her. "Stand back," called a new voice, deep and authoritative. The crowd parted, revealing a tall man in a worn leather vest and dusty hat. Abigail couldn't see his face clearly, but there was something in his confident stride that held her attention. He approached the frantic horse with slow, deliberate movements, speaking in a low voice that she couldn't quite make out. Miraculously, the stallion began to calm under his steady approach. The man continued speaking to the animal, his hand extended but not touching, until the horse's breathing steadied and its violent movements subsided to nervous shuffling. "That's it, boy," the man said, loud enough for Abigail to hear now. "No one's gonna hurt you." The crowd murmured in appreciation as the stranger finally placed his hand on the stallion's neck, stroking gently. The horse allowed the touch, though its eyes remained wary. "How'd you do that?" asked the livery owner, clearly impressed. The man shrugged. "He's scared, not mean. Just needs someone to listen to him instead of forcing him." Something about those words struck Abigail deeply. To be seen as scared rather than mean, to be listened to rather than forced, these were concepts foreign to her own experience. The crowd began to disperse as the excitement waned. Abigail remained, her carpetbag forgotten at her feet, watching as the stranger continued to work with the stallion. He moved with a quiet confidence that was mesmerizing. When he finally turned, securing the horse to a hitching post, Abigail caught her first clear look at his face. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, when they briefly met hers across the street, were a startling shade of blue against his sun-darkened skin. Feeling suddenly self-conscious, Abigail retrieved her bag and continued on her way. She had wasted enough time already, and daylight was precious. She needed to find shelter before night fell, though where that might be, she had no idea. The outskirts of Whitehorn gave way to scattered farms and ranches. Abigail followed the main road, hoping to reach the next town before dark, though she knew it was unlikely. Her shoes, not meant for long journeys, were already pinching her feet, and the spring sun was surprisingly warm. After walking for what felt like hours, she paused beside a small creek to rest. The water was clear and cold, and she gratefully scooped handfuls to her parched lips. As she sat on a fallen log, the reality of her situation crashed over her anew. She was truly alone. No family, no home, no future. Her father's final legacy, worthlessness, seemed to be the only thing she had inherited. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. Crying would not change her circumstances. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up sharply. Riders meant potential danger for a woman alone. She quickly gathered her belongings, preparing to hide among the trees, but she was too late. A horse and rider appeared around the bend in the road. Abigail froze as recognition dawned. It was the man from the livery stable, mounted on a chestnut mare. The black stallion he had calmed was tethered behind him, seeming remarkably placid now. The man pulled his horse to a stop when he spotted her. "Afternoon, miss," he called, touching the brim of his hat. "You're a fair piece from town." Abigail clutched her carpetbag tighter. "I'm traveling," she replied stiffly. He studied her for a moment, taking in her city shoes, modest dress, and small bag. His expression revealed nothing, but Abigail felt uncomfortably exposed under his gaze. "Traveling where, if you don't mind my asking?" His tone was conversational, but there was an undercurrent of concern that caught her off guard. "The next town," she answered vaguely, unwilling to admit she had no real destination. "Silver Creek." He shook his head. "That's a good 20 miles from here. You won't make it before dark, not on foot." Abigail's heart sank. 20 miles was much farther than she had estimated. "I'll manage," she said, with more confidence than she felt. The man dismounted in one fluid motion. Up close, he was even taller than she had thought, towering over her slender frame. "Name's Ethan Lawson," he said, extending his hand. "I have a ranch about 3 miles back. My housekeeper could use some company, and we've got plenty of room." Alarm bells rang in Abigail's mind. A strange man offering shelter to a woman alone was rarely motivated by pure kindness. Her father had warned her about such things, perhaps the only useful guidance he had ever provided. "Thank you, but no," she said firmly. "I prefer to continue on my way." Ethan Lawson didn't seem offended by her refusal. "Fair enough, but there's a storm brewing." He nodded toward the western horizon, where dark clouds were indeed gathering. Spring storms in these parts can turn deadly quick. At least let me give you a ride to Silver Creek. Abigail hesitated. The thought of 20 more miles on her already aching feet was daunting, and the approaching storm was concerning. Still, accepting help from a stranger went against everything she had been taught. As if sensing her dilemma, Ethan stepped back, giving her space. I understand your caution, miss. Tell you what, I'll ride ahead a bit and give you time to consider. If you decide you want that ride, just give a holler. With that, he remounted his mare and continued down the road at a leisurely pace. Abigail watched him go, conflicted. There was something different about Ethan Lawson, a quietness that didn't match the rough cowboy she was used to seeing in town. Still, trusting a man she had just met seemed foolish at best, dangerous at worst. The first fat raindrops began to fall, making the decision for her. Mr. Lawson, she called, hurrying after him. I would appreciate that ride after all. He reined his horse around, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thought you might change your mind when the weather turned. He dismounted again and approached her, leading both horses. The stallion's still a bit unpredictable. You'd better ride with me. Before Abigail could protest, Ethan had lifted her carpetbag and secured it to the mare's saddle. Then, to her complete shock, he placed his hands on her waist and lifted her onto the horse as effortlessly as if she weighed nothing at all. I can manage on my own, she said stiffly, embarrassed by the intimate contact. I'm sure you can, he replied easily, swinging up behind her. But we need to outrun this storm, and Daisy here moves faster with a lighter load. Hold on. Abigail had no choice but to grip the saddle horn as Ethan urged the mare into a trot. She was acutely aware of his presence behind her, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the strength in the arms that reached around her to hold the reins. The rain began to fall harder, and Ethan urged the mare to a gallop. The black stallion kept pace behind them, seemingly enjoying the run. Abigail had never ridden so fast in her life, and despite her apprehension, there was a thrill to the speed and power of the horse beneath her. They rode for what seemed like ages, the rain soaking through Abigail's shawl and dress. Just when she thought she couldn't endure the cold and wet any longer, a large structure emerged from the gray curtain of rain. My ranch, Ethan explained, his voice close to her ear. Silver Creek will have to wait until the storm passes. Abigail's stomach knotted with anxiety. She was now completely at the mercy of a stranger, miles from town, with night falling fast. But as they approached the ranch house, a substantial two-story building with warm light glowing from its windows, some of her fear eased. This was clearly a prosperous, established operation, not some lonely outpost where no one would hear her scream. An older woman appeared on the porch as they rode up, her face creased with concern. Ethan Lawson, what in heaven's name are you doing out in this weather? And who is this poor, soaked creature you've brought home? Ethan dismounted first, then reached up to help Abigail down. His hands were strong and steady on her waist, and for a moment, as she slid from the saddle into his arms, their faces were mere inches apart. His eyes, she noticed, weren't simply blue, they were the deep, clear blue of a summer sky, ringed with darker indigo. He set her gently on her feet and turned to the woman. Mrs. Cooper, this is Miss Winters, Abigail supplied, suddenly realizing they had never properly introduced themselves. Abigail Winters. Miss Winters was headed to Silver Creek on foot, Ethan explained, leading the horses toward a nearby barn where a young stable hand had appeared. The storm caught us, so I brought her here until it passes. Mrs. Cooper clucked her tongue disapprovingly. On foot to Silver Creek. Whatever for, child. Without waiting for an answer, she ushered Abigail toward the house. "Never mind that now. Let's get you dry and warm before you catch your death." The interior of the ranch house was as impressive as its exterior, spacious rooms with solid furniture, woven rugs covering polished wooden floors, and a massive stone fireplace where a welcoming fire blazed. It spoke of comfort and permanence, two things Abigail had never known. Mrs. Cooper, who introduced herself as the housekeeper, led Abigail to a bedroom on the second floor. "You can change into these," she said, pulling a nightgown and robe from a chest. "They belonged to Mr. Lawson's sister when she visited last summer. Should fit you well enough until your clothes dry." "Mr. Lawson has a sister?" Abigail asked, surprised by her own curiosity. "Yes, Elizabeth. Lives back east with her husband and children. Visits once a year or so." Mrs. Cooper handed her a towel. "Now get out of those wet things before you catch a chill. Dinner will be ready in an hour." Left alone, Abigail surveyed the room with wonder. It was larger than her entire living quarters above the store had been, with a four-poster bed draped in a colorful quilt, a dressing table with a real mirror, and curtains framing a window that would likely offer a view of the ranch grounds when it wasn't obscured by rain. As she changed into the borrowed nightgown and robe, both of which were finer than anything she had ever owned, Abigail tried to make sense of her situation. This morning, she had been homeless and hopeless, convinced of her worthlessness. Now she was in a beautiful home, being treated with kindness by strangers. The other shoe would drop soon enough, she reminded herself. Nothing good ever lasted in her experience. Mr. Lawson would want something in return for his hospitality. They always did. When she made her way downstairs an hour later, her hair dried and neatly braided, she found Ethan and Mrs. Cooper in the dining room. Ethan had also changed, now wearing a clean shirt with his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms tanned by the sun. He rose when she entered, a gesture of respect she wasn't accustomed to. "Miss Winters, I hope you found everything to your satisfaction." "Yes, thank you," she replied cautiously, taking the seat Mrs. Cooper indicated. "You have a lovely home." "Been in my family for 2 generations," he said, resuming his seat. "My father built it, expanded it when he married my mother. I've added a bit since taking over." Mrs. Cooper served a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. Abigail hadn't eaten so well in years, perhaps ever, but she was careful to maintain proper manners despite her hunger. "So, Miss Winters," Ethan said as they ate, "what takes you to Silver Creek?" Abigail hesitated, fork poised above her plate. She could lie, invent some relative or position waiting for her, but something about Ethan Lawson's direct gaze made her reluctant to deceive him. "I don't have any specific plans," she admitted finally. "My father died recently. The bank took our store and home for his debts. I simply needed to leave Whitehorn." She expected pity or worse, the calculating look men often gave a woman they perceived as desperate. Instead, Ethan simply nodded. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, "and for your situation. It's not easy starting over." "No," she agreed softly, "it isn't." Mrs. Cooper made a sympathetic noise. "You poor dear, no family to take you in." "No, it was just my father and me since my mother passed when I was 8. "Well," said Mrs. Cooper decisively, "you'll stay here until you decide what's next, won't she, Mr. Lawson?" "Of course," Ethan agreed, though Abigail detected a hint of surprise at his housekeeper's forwardness. "We have plenty of room, and the spring storms can last for days." Abigail wanted to refuse, to maintain her independence and guard against creating a debt she couldn't repay, but the thought of continuing her journey to nowhere in particular held little appeal. "That's very kind," she said cautiously, "but I wouldn't want to impose." Nonsense, Mrs. Cooper declared. Having another woman around will be a pleasant change. Too many men on this ranch as it is. After dinner, Ethan excused himself to check on the livestock, leaving Abigail with Mrs. Cooper. The older woman chattered companionably as they cleared the table, sharing tidbits about the ranch and its operations. Mr. Lawson runs one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory, she said proudly. Started with just a few hundred head from his father and built it to thousands. Smart businessman and fair too, treats his men well. Has he been running it long? Abigail asked, curious despite herself. Since his father passed 5 years back. He was just 24 then, youngest rancher in these parts. Plenty said he couldn't do it, but he proved them wrong. Mrs. Cooper's expression softened. He's a good man, Miss Winters, not like some. Abigail recognized the subtle reassurance for what it was. I appreciate your hospitality, Mrs. Cooper and his. That night, lying in the comfortable bed with rain pattering against the window, Abigail tried to sort through her jumbled emotions. Relief at having shelter, wariness about her dependence on strangers, and an unexpected flutter whenever she thought of the way Ethan Lawson had lifted her onto his horse as if she weighed nothing at all. She fell asleep to the sound of the rain, her dreams for once free of her father's angry voice. Morning brought sunshine and clarity. Abigail woke to find her clothes cleaned and pressed, laid out neatly on a chair near her bed. After dressing, she made her way downstairs, following the aroma of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was empty save for Mrs. Cooper, who was bustling around the large cast-iron stove. "Good morning, dear," the housekeeper greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well, better than I have in years," Abigail admitted. "Is there anything I can help with? You can take that coffee pot out to the porch if you'd like." "Mr. Lawson is out there watching the men work. Breakfast will be ready shortly." Abigail found Ethan leaning against a porch post, his gaze fixed on the corral where several cowboys were working with horses. Among them was the black stallion from yesterday, still spirited but less frantic under a handler's careful guidance. "Coffee," she offered, holding up the pot. Ethan turned, a smile warming his features when he saw her. "Thank you, Miss Winters." He held out his cup for her to fill. "Did you rest well?" "Very, thank you." She poured the steaming liquid, then settled into a nearby rocking chair with her own cup. "Your ranch is beautiful in the daylight." Indeed, the Lawson ranch was impressive. The main house sat on a gentle rise, overlooking a sprawling operation of barns, corrals, bunkhouses, and beyond them, vast pastures where cattle grazed. In the distance, mountains rose blue and majestic against the sky. "It's taken a lot of work to build it to this," Ethan said, pride evident in his voice. "My father started with almost nothing. I've tried to honor his legacy by making it even better." "You've succeeded," Abigail said sincerely. "I've never seen anything like it." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the ranch hands at work. Finally, Abigail gathered her courage to address the question weighing on her mind. "Mr. Lawson, I'm very grateful for your hospitality, but I should continue to Silver Creek today. I don't want to impose further." Ethan studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "You're welcome to leave if that's what you want, Miss Winters, but may I ask what awaits you in Silver Creek?" The direct question caught her off guard. I don't know anyone there," she admitted. "I just needed somewhere to go," he nodded thoughtfully. "And once you reach Silver Creek, what then?" "I'll find work," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I can sew, keep accounts, bake. I'm not afraid of hard work." "I don't doubt that," Ethan said. "But Silver Creek is a rough town for a woman alone, mostly miners and cowboys looking to blow off steam." Abigail's heart sank. She hadn't considered that the next town might be even less hospitable than Whitehorn. Mrs. Cooper mentioned last night that she could use some help around here, Ethan continued, his tone casual. The ranch is growing, and she's not as young as she used to be. If you're looking for work, you could do worse than staying on for a while. Abigail stared at him, searching for some hidden motive in his offer. Are you offering me a position? As what exactly? As Mrs. Cooper's assistant, he clarified quickly, perhaps sensing her suspicion. Cooking, cleaning, mending whatever needs doing. Room, board, and fair wages. No strings attached, Miss Winters. The offer was tempting more than tempting. A safe place to stay, honest work, and time to figure out her next steps. But experience had taught Abigail to be wary of anything that seemed too good to be true. Why would you do this for a stranger? She asked bluntly. Ethan's expression turned thoughtful. I believe in helping folks when I can. My father taught me that. He was the kind of man who never turned away someone in need. He paused. Besides, I've seen the way you handle yourself. You're proud, capable. That's the kind of person I want working on my ranch. His words warmed something inside her that had been cold for a very long time. To be seen as capable rather than worthless was a novel experience. I would need to earn my keep, she said firmly. No charity. No charity, he agreed. Just fair work for fair pay. Then I accept, Mr. Lawson. Thank you. His smile was genuine and pleased. Good, and please call me Ethan. Mr. Lawson makes me feel like my father. Then you must call me Abigail, she responded, the formality between them easing slightly. Mrs. Cooper was delighted with the arrangement, immediately taking Abigail under her wing and showing her the workings of the large household. The ranch employed nearly 20 men, all of whom took their midday and evening meals in the bunkhouse, which meant considerable cooking and baking. I've been managing alone since the last girl left to get married 6 months ago, Mrs. Cooper explained as they worked side by side in the kitchen that afternoon. My old bones aren't what they used to be. Over the next few days, Abigail settled into a routine. She rose early to help Mrs. Cooper prepare breakfast, spent the morning cleaning and baking, the afternoon sewing or helping in the garden, and the evening assisting with dinner. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way that serving in her father's store had never been. She saw Ethan only at mealtimes, as he was busy with the spring calving. But when their paths did cross, she found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength and thoughtfulness. He always thanked her for the meals, commented on improvements she made to the house, and treated her with a respect she had rarely experienced from a man. A week after her arrival, Abigail was hanging laundry in the yard when she noticed a commotion at the corral. The black stallion had broken free and was galloping around the ranch yard, cowboys in pursuit. She froze, the wet sheet in her hands forgotten as the powerful animal headed in her direction. Suddenly, Ethan was there, placing himself between her and the charging horse. With a steady voice and unwavering stance, he caught the stallion's attention, speaking to it as he had that first day in town. Easy, Midnight. Easy now. No one's gonna hurt you. To Abigail's amazement, the horse slowed, circling warily but no longer in a panic. Ethan continued speaking softly, never raising his voice or making sudden movements, until the stallion allowed him to approach and take hold of its halter. Sorry about that, Abigail, he said, slightly breathless as he led the now calm horse back toward the corral. Midnight's still getting used to being handled. He was wild until recently. You have a way with him, she observed, her heart still racing from the encounter. He trusts you. Ethan patted the stallion's neck. Trust has to be earned, can't be forced. He glanced back at her. That goes for people too, I reckon. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. Abigail looked away first, returning to her laundry with slightly trembling hands. Later that evening, as she was finishing the dinner dishes, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway. "If you're not too tired, would you like to see something?" he asked. Curiosity piqued, Abigail dried her hands and followed him outside. The spring evening was mild, the air fragrant with wildflowers. Ethan led her to a small rise behind the house where a single oak tree spread its branches against the darkening sky. "Best view on the ranch," he said, gesturing to the panorama before them. The sun was setting, painting the western sky in breathtaking shades of gold, orange, and crimson. Below them, the ranch buildings were silhouetted against the fading light, and beyond stretched the vast Montana landscape, rolling plains giving way to distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Abigail breathed, the majesty of the scene momentarily overwhelming her. "This is where I come when I need to think," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "My father used to bring me here when I was a boy, said a man should always remember how small he is compared to what God created." They stood in companionable silence as the colors deepened and the first stars appeared. Abigail was acutely aware of Ethan's presence beside her, not intrusively close, but near enough that she could sense his warmth in the cooling evening air. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she said finally. "I thought you might appreciate it." He turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful in the fading light. "You have an eye for beauty. I've seen it in the flowers you've arranged in the house, the care you take with the meals." The compliment caught her off guard. "My mother taught me that," she said softly. She believed in finding beauty even in difficult circumstances. "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. Abigail rarely spoke of her mother, but something about the peaceful evening and Ethan's attentive presence loosened the tight hold she kept on those memories. "She tried to shield me from my father's moods, to create moments of joy despite his bitterness." "What happened to her?" Ethan asked gently. "Fever took her when I was 8. After that." Abigail trailed off, unable to articulate the years of loneliness and verbal abuse that had followed. "After that, you were alone with your father," Ethan finished for her, understanding in his voice. She nodded, surprised to find tears threatening. She blinked them back quickly. She had learned long ago that tears solved nothing. "He wasn't a kind man," she said simply. Ethan's expression darkened. "I gathered as much from what you've said and haven't said. I'm sorry, Abigail. No child deserves to grow up without kindness." His compassion, offered so freely and without pity, touched something deep within her. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider that perhaps her father had been wrong about her. Perhaps she wasn't worthless after all. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan spoke again, his voice quiet but firm. "Whatever he told you about yourself, it wasn't true. I've known you only a short time, but I can see your worth clear as day. You're strong, Abigail, stronger than you know." The tears she had been fighting spilled over then, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. Ethan made no move to touch her, seeming to understand instinctively that she needed space in her vulnerability. "I apologize," she said, wiping her cheeks with embarrassed haste. "I don't usually. No need to apologize for being human," he interrupted gently. "We all carry burdens. Sharing them makes them lighter." They walked back to the house in silence, but it was a comfortable one. Something had shifted between them, a trust beginning to form like the delicate shoots of spring grass after a long winter. As the weeks passed, Abigail found herself blossoming in ways she had never thought possible. The hard work on the ranch suited her, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly valued. Mrs. Cooper praised her cooking and organization. The ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully when she brought fresh bread to the bunkhouse. And Ethan watched her with a warmth in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. Spring gave way to early summer, bringing longer days and the busy season of branding calves. Ethan was often out with the men from dawn to dusk, but he always made time to join her on the porch in the evenings, sharing stories of his day and listening attentively to hers. One particularly warm evening in late June, Abigail was setting bread dough to rise when she heard a commotion outside. Curious, she went to the window and saw Ethan dismounting from his horse, his movements stiff and pained. One of the ranch hands was supporting him, concern evident in his posture. Abigail hurried outside, wiping flour from her hands. "What happened?" "Horse threw him while they were working cattle in the north pasture," the hand explained. "Think he might have broke some ribs." "I'm fine," Ethan insisted, though his pale face and labored breathing suggested otherwise. "Just need to rest a bit." "You need a doctor," Abigail countered firmly. "Someone should ride for Dr. Patterson in Silver Creek." Ethan started to argue, but a sharp intake of breath cut him off mid-sentence. Mrs. Cooper, who had joined them on the porch, took charge. "Miguel, ride for the doctor, Jake. Help Mr. Lawson to his room. Abigail, fetch hot water and bandages." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Abigail prepared Ethan's room, boiled water for compresses, and gathered the medicinal supplies Mrs. Cooper kept for emergencies. When she finally entered his bedroom with a tray of tea and medicine, she found him propped up against pillows, his face drawn with pain but his eyes alert. "You don't have to fuss over me," he said as she set the tray on his bedside table. "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have," she replied, pouring a cup of tea and adding a spoonful of honey. "That doesn't mean you should suffer needlessly." He accepted the tea with a grateful nod. "You sound like my mother. She had no patience for stoic men either. Smart woman." Abigail hesitated, then asked, "Where is your mother now?" A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "She passed 3 years ago. Heart gave out suddenly one winter morning. She's buried under the oak tree next to my father." "I'm so sorry." The thought of that peaceful spot marking such personal losses touched her deeply. Ethan's expression softened. "She would have liked you, I think. She valued determination and kindness. You have both in abundance." The compliment warmed her, but before she could respond, Mrs. Cooper entered with fresh bandages. "Doctor's on his way," she announced. "Now, Mr. Lawson, we need to wrap those ribs until he gets here. Abigail, if you'll help me sit him up." Together, they managed to remove Ethan's shirt and wrap his torso tightly with clean bandages. Abigail tried to maintain a professional demeanor, but she couldn't help noticing the lean strength of his body, the broad shoulders and well-defined muscles that spoke of years of physical labor. A long scar ran across his left shoulder, silvery white against his tanned skin. "Old injury," he explained, catching her glance. "Cattle stampede when I was 19. Dr. Patterson arrived just before midnight, confirming what they had suspected: 2 broken ribs and severe bruising. He prescribed rest and limited movement for at least 2 weeks. "Which means no riding, no roping, no lifting," the doctor emphasized, fixing Ethan with a stern look. "I mean it, Lawson. You'll heal clean if you rest, but push yourself and those ribs could puncture something important." After the doctor left, Abigail took the first watch, sitting in a chair near Ethan's bed to ensure he rested comfortably. The house was quiet, the only sounds the ticking of the clock and Ethan's steady breathing. "You don't have to stay," he said softly, his voice heavy with the laudanum the doctor had given him for pain. "I'll be fine until morning." "I know you will," she replied, adjusting the lamp to a lower flame, "but I'll stay anyway." He studied her in the dim light, his expression unreadable. "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Because you're hurt," she said simply. "Because you've shown me kindness when I needed it. Because—" She hesitated, unsure how to articulate the deeper feelings that were growing within her. Because I care what happens to you, she finished quietly. A slow smile spread across Ethan's face, transforming it despite the lines of pain. I care what happens to you too, Abigail Winters, more than I should probably admit while under the influence of laudanum. She laughed softly. Then perhaps we should continue this conversation when you're clearer headed. Perhaps we should, he agreed, his eyes already drifting closed. But don't forget I said it. I won't, she promised, settling back in her chair to keep watch through the night. The next 2 weeks saw a reversal of their usual roles. Now it was Abigail caring for Ethan, bringing him meals, helping him move about when necessary, and keeping him company during the long hours of enforced rest. She read to him from books in his father's library, played chess, a game he taught her with surprising patience, and listened to his stories about growing up on the ranch. Despite his initial resistance to being coddled, as he put it, Ethan proved to be a good patient. His natural consideration extended to not making unnecessary demands, and he expressed genuine appreciation for Abigail's care. During those quiet days, their relationship deepened in ways that might have taken months under normal circumstances. They talked about everything: childhood memories, hopes for the future, fears and dreams and disappointments. Abigail found herself sharing thoughts she had never voiced aloud, and Ethan listened with a respect that made her feel truly heard for the first time in her life. One afternoon, as she was changing the bandages around his ribs, Ethan caught her hand in his. I remember the first time I saw you, he said softly. Standing outside the livery in Whitehorn, watching me with Midnight. You looked lost, but not broken. There was a strength in you that caught my attention. Abigail's breath caught at the warmth of his hand around hers. I was lost, she admitted. I had no idea what would become of me. And now, his blue eyes held her steadily. Now I'm found, she said simply. It was true in more ways than she could express. She had found purpose, security, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. Ethan's smile was gentle. I'm glad, Abigail. This ranch has been better for having you here. The moment hung between them, full of unspoken possibilities, until Mrs. Cooper's voice calling from downstairs broke the spell. Abigail withdrew her hand reluctantly and went to answer the housekeeper's summons. That evening, as she prepared for bed, Abigail caught her reflection in the mirror and paused, studying herself with new eyes. The woman who looked back at her was not the same one who had fled Whitehorn 2 months ago. This woman stood straighter, her eyes clearer and more confident. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long had faded, replaced by a quiet certainty in her own capabilities. She was no longer the worthless girl her father had claimed she was. She was Abigail Winters, capable, respected, and perhaps even loved. The thought sent a rush of warmth through her. Was that what she was seeing in Ethan's eyes? Was that the meaning behind his gentle touches, his thoughtful words, his evident pleasure in her company? And what of her own feelings? The flutter in her stomach when he entered a room, the way his smile seemed to brighten even the cloudiest day, the deep contentment she felt in his presence, these were not the reactions of mere friendship or gratitude. Abigail had never been in love before, had never expected to experience it. But as she lay in bed that night, watching moonlight pattern the ceiling, she acknowledged the truth to herself. She was falling in love with Ethan Lawson. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. What if he didn't feel the same? What if he saw her only as an employee, a friend at most? And even if he did return her feelings, could she trust them to last? Her experience with men, limited as it was to her father and the few suitors who had briefly pursued her in Whitehorn, had taught her that male affection was conditional at best, cruel at worst. But Ethan was different. In every way that mattered, He had proven himself to be a man of integrity, kindness, and steadfast character. If anyone deserved her trust, it was him. With that thought warming her heart, Abigail drifted into a peaceful sleep. By mid-July, Ethan was fully recovered and back to his normal duties. The ranch was busy with summer activities, haying in the meadows, moving cattle to higher pastures, and preparing for the autumn roundup. Abigail found herself with additional responsibilities as Mrs. Cooper's arthritis worsened in the summer heat, but she welcomed the challenge. One particular afternoon, as she was returning from delivering lunch to the haying crew, Abigail spotted Ethan in the corral with Midnight. The stallion had been gradually accepting training over the past months, but was still considered too unpredictable for most of the hands to ride. She paused to watch as Ethan worked with the powerful animal. There was a harmony between them, a mutual respect that was beautiful to observe. Ethan never forced the horse, never used harsh methods. Instead, he offered patience, consistency, and gentle guidance. As if sensing her presence, Ethan looked up and smiled. "Want to say hello?" he called. "He's in a good mood today." Abigail approached the corral fence cautiously. Midnight eyed her with interest but no alarm as Ethan led him closer. "He's magnificent," she said, admiring the stallion's gleaming coat and proud bearing. "He is," Ethan agreed, "and he knows it too. Proud as they come, this one, with good reason." Abigail hesitantly extended her hand, palm up. To her surprise, Midnight stretched his neck to sniff her fingers, then allowed her to stroke his velvety nose. "He's softer than I expected. He likes you," Ethan observed, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Good judge of character, horses." Their eyes met over the horse's neck, and Abigail felt that now familiar warmth spread through her. Ethan's gaze held hers for a long moment before he spoke again. "I have to ride to Silver Creek tomorrow for supplies. Would you like to come along? Might be nice for you to see something beyond the ranch after all these weeks." The invitation sent a thrill through her. "I'd love to," she replied, perhaps too quickly, "if Mrs. Cooper can spare me." "Already asked her," Ethan admitted with a sheepish smile. "She said you deserve a day off." The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Abigail rose early, taking special care with her appearance. The wages Ethan had been paying her had allowed her to order fabric and sewing supplies from the Silver Creek General Store, and she had made herself several new dresses. For today, she chose a sky blue cotton with white trim, simple but becoming. When she came downstairs, Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, talking with Mrs. Cooper. He turned as she entered, and the appreciation in his eyes made her blush. "You look lovely, Abigail," he said simply. "Thank you." She accepted the wrapped package Mrs. Cooper handed her. "Lunch for the road. Can't have you two going hungry," the housekeeper confirmed with a knowing smile. "Now off with you both. Enjoy your day." Outside, Abigail was surprised to see not a wagon but two saddled horses, Ethan's chestnut mare and a gentle-looking bay gelding. "I thought we might ride rather than take the wagon," Ethan explained. "It's a beautiful day for it, and we can cover ground faster, unless you'd prefer the wagon." "No, riding is fine," she assured him, though she hadn't been on a horse alone since she was a girl. "It's been a while, though." "Charlie here is the gentlest horse on the ranch," Ethan said, patting the bay's neck. "Perfect for remembering old skills." He helped her mount, his hands strong and sure on her waist, then swung effortlessly onto his own horse. They set out at an easy pace, following a trail that wound through meadows bright with summer wildflowers. The day was perfect for riding, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and pine. As they rode, Ethan pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the land they passed through. Abigail found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse beneath her, enjoying the freedom of movement and the companionship. "You're a natural," Ethan commented as they paused atop a rise to let the horses rest. "Sure you haven't been riding all these years?" Abigail laughed. "Quite sure. There wasn't much opportunity in town, and my father—" She trailed off, the memory of her father's restrictions still painful despite the time and distance. "Your father didn't approve of riding," Ethan guessed, his expression sympathetic. "My father didn't approve of much that brought me joy," she said quietly. "After my mother died, he seemed determined to ensure I found no happiness." Ethan's face darkened. "Some men shouldn't be fathers," he said, a rare edge to his voice. "I'm sorry you had to endure that, Abigail." She shook her head. "It's in the past now, and in some strange way I'm almost grateful. If not for him, for what happened after he died, I wouldn't be here now." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together. "I'm grateful too," Ethan said softly. "More than I can say." They continued on to Silver Creek, arriving by midday. The town was larger than Whitehorn, boasting a hotel, several saloons, a church, and a variety of businesses along its bustling main street. Ethan led the way to the general store, where he was greeted warmly by the proprietor. "Lawson, good to see you. And who's this lovely lady?" The storekeeper, a portly man with friendly eyes, looked at Abigail with open curiosity. "Samuel, this is Miss Abigail Winters. She's been helping Mrs. Cooper at the ranch. Abigail Samuel Johnson, the finest merchant in Silver Creek." "A pleasure, Miss Winters," Samuel said, bowing slightly. "Any friend of Ethan's is welcome here." As Ethan conducted his business, ordering supplies for the ranch, Abigail browsed the store's offerings. It was well stocked, with everything from practical necessities to small luxuries. A display of hair combs caught her eye, simple but pretty, carved from tortoiseshell. "See something you like?" Ethan asked, appearing at her side. "They're beautiful," she admitted, touching one comb lightly. "My mother had one similar. I always admired it." Without hesitation, Ethan picked up the comb and added it to his purchases. When Abigail protested, he shook his head firmly. "Consider it a thank you for all your help during my recovery," he said. "Please, Abigail, I'd like you to have it." The gift touched her deeply, not for its monetary value, which was modest, but for the thoughtfulness behind it. That Ethan had noticed her interest and wanted to bring her pleasure meant more than he could know. After completing their business at the store, they had lunch at the hotel dining room, a rare treat for Abigail, who couldn't remember the last time she had eaten in such an establishment. The food was good, though she privately thought her own cooking was better, and Ethan seemed to take pleasure in introducing her to people he knew in town. "Everyone seems to respect you greatly," she observed as they left the hotel. "You must have many friends here." Ethan shrugged modestly. "I try to deal fairly with folks. My father taught me that a man's reputation is built on how he treats others, especially those who can't do anything for him in return." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Ethan agreed, a touch of sadness in his smile. "I wish you could have known him. He would have liked you." The simple statement, offered so naturally, stirred something in Abigail's heart. To be accepted as part of Ethan's world, to be someone he believed his family would have approved of it, meant more than any compliment about her appearance or abilities. They spent the remainder of the afternoon visiting various merchants for supplies, then started the journey home as the sun began its westward descent. The return ride was peaceful, both of them content, with comfortable silence punctuated by occasional conversation. As they neared the ranch, the setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light. Ethan suggested they take a slight detour to the oak tree on the rise, their special spot, as Abigail had come to think of it. They dismounted and let the horses graze while they sat beneath the spreading branches, watching as the day surrendered to evening. The beauty of the moment was almost overwhelming: the painted sky, the gentle breeze, the man sitting beside her with quiet appreciation in his eyes. "Thank you for today," Abigail said softly. "It was wonderful." Ethan turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Abigail, there's something I've been wanting to say to you." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "These past months, having you at the ranch, getting to know you, it's been the best time of my life." Her heart began to race. "It's been wonderful for me too, Ethan. When I found you on the road that day, I thought I was just helping someone in need. I had no idea how much you would come to mean to me." He took her hand gently in his. "I know you came here for work, not for what I'm about to say. And if I'm speaking out of turn, please tell me and we can forget this conversation ever happened." Abigail could barely breathe. "What are you trying to say, Ethan?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you," he said simply, his blue eyes holding hers with unwavering sincerity. "I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you've made the ranch feel more like home than it ever has. I love who I am when I'm with you." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes, but for once they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Ethan, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know your past experiences might make it hard to trust a man's words. I'm prepared to wait, to prove myself worthy of your trust," and she silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "Ethan Lawson, I love you too," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you lifted me onto your horse in the rain." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Truly, truly," she confirmed, her own smile matching his. "You've shown me what it means to be valued, to be respected. You've helped me see myself as something more than worthless." A shadow crossed Ethan's face at her words. "You were never worthless, Abigail, not for a single moment of your life. The fact that your father couldn't see your worth speaks to his blindness, not your value." His vehemence brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I'm beginning to believe that," she admitted. "Because of you." Ethan reached up to cup her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you, Abigail Winters?" Her yes was barely audible, but he heard it nonetheless. His lips met hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. It was a gentle kiss, respectful and sweet, yet it contained a promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Abigail felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, as if the last pieces of a puzzle had finally fallen into place. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, their horses walking placidly side by side in the gathering dusk. The lights of the house glowed welcomingly as they approached, and for the first time, Abigail truly felt she was coming home. Mrs. Cooper took one look at their clasped hands and beaming faces and broke into a broad smile. "Well, it's about time," she declared, her eyes twinkling. "I was beginning to think I'd be old and gray before you two figured things out." Ethan laughed, his joy infectious. "Mrs. Cooper, you've been old and gray as long as I've known you." The housekeeper swatted at him affectionately. "Cheeky boy, now come in and have some supper before it gets cold." Later that evening, after Mrs. Cooper had retired for the night, Ethan and Abigail sat together on the porch swing, watching as stars appeared one by one in the velvet sky. Abigail's head rested comfortably on Ethan's shoulder, his arm around her waist holding her close. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ethan's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Whatever you want to happen," he said. "I meant what I said earlier. I love you, Abigail. I want to build a life with you, but I understand if you need time." She lifted her head to look at him, taking in the earnest expression on his beloved face. "I don't need time," she said with quiet certainty. "I know what I want, and what's that? You," she said simply. "A life with you, here on the ranch, if that's what you want too." His smile was answer enough, but he put it into words anyway. More than anything. He took her hand in his touch gentle but sure. "Abigail Winters, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner in all things?" The question, though not unexpected after their declarations earlier, still took her breath away. This was what her mother had wanted for her, a good man who would cherish her, a love based on mutual respect and genuine affection. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." The joy that illuminated his face was like nothing Abigail had ever seen. He gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I promise to spend my life making sure you never doubt your worth again," he whispered. "You are everything to me, Abigail, my heart, my home, my world." The word resonated through her like a bell, clear and true. My world. From worthless to someone's world, the journey seemed impossible. And yet here she was, transformed by love and the courage to accept it. They were married 3 weeks later in the Silver Creek Church, with Mrs. Cooper beaming proudly in the front pew, and the ranch hands lined up awkwardly in their Sunday best behind her. Abigail wore a simple white dress she had made herself, with the tortoiseshell comb securing a veil of delicate lace. Ethan, handsome in a new suit, looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever beheld. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with such tenderness that several of the tough cowboys were seen wiping suspicious moisture from their eyes. Their wedding night was everything Abigail had dreamed of and more. Ethan was gentle and patient, guiding her through her initial nervousness with loving care. Their physical union was a natural extension of the emotional bond they had formed, a communion of bodies and souls that left Abigail feeling truly complete for the first time in her life. As they lay entwined in the moonlight, Ethan traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured. "To find you, to be loved by you, it's more than I ever dared hope for." Abigail nestled closer, her heart full to bursting. "I'm the lucky one," she insisted. "You saved me, Ethan, not just from homelessness that day on the road, but from believing I was nothing. You helped me find my worth." "You always had worth," he corrected gently. "You just needed someone to remind you of it." He kissed her softly. "And now, I get to spend the rest of my life doing exactly that." The years that followed were the happiest of Abigail's life. The ranch prospered under their joint care, Ethan managing the cattle and land, Abigail overseeing the household and gardens. They expanded operations, built a new barn, and added comfortable guest rooms for when Ethan's sister and her family visited from the east. Mrs. Cooper, though she claimed to be too old for such nonsense, stayed on, taking enormous pleasure in teaching Abigail everything she knew about running a large household. When arthritis finally forced her to reduce her duties, she moved into a cozy room on the main floor that Ethan had specially built for her, becoming more like a beloved grandmother than an employee. 2 years after their wedding, Abigail gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Emma Grace. Ethan's tenderness toward his infant daughter moved Abigail to tears. He would sit for hours with the tiny bundle cradled in his strong arms, singing softly and telling her stories about the ranch she would one day help run. "She has your eyes," he said one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset while Emma slept in Abigail's arms. "And your spirit, I think. She'll be a force of nature, this one." "Like her father," Abigail replied with a smile. stubborn and gentle all at once. Emma was joined 2 years later by a brother, James Ethan, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and easy smile. Their family felt complete, a living testament to the love that had grown from that chance meeting on a rainy day. As the children grew, Abigail sometimes marveled at the contrast between their childhood and her own. Where she had known fear and criticism, they knew security and encouragement. Where she had been told of her worthlessness, they were constantly reminded of their value. And always, there was Ethan, the cornerstone of their family, the man who had changed everything with his steady love and unwavering belief in her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Abigail with a special gift. He led her out to the corral where Midnight, now a mature stallion but still magnificent, stood beside a beautiful black filly. "She's Midnight's daughter," Ethan explained. "Born last spring. I've been training her specially for you." Abigail approached the young horse with wonder. "For me, but I'm not an experienced rider." "You're better than you think," Ethan said with that familiar confidence in her that never failed to warm her heart. "And she's gentle, like her sire became." They both just needed to be understood. The filly nuzzled Abigail's hand curiously, her dark eyes intelligent and trusting. "She's beautiful," Abigail breathed. "Does she have a name?" "I thought you should name her," Ethan replied. "She's yours after all." Abigail stroked the filly's sleek neck, thinking. "Hope," she said finally. "Her name is Hope." Ethan's smile was knowing. "Perfect," he agreed. "Hope it is." Later that evening, after the children were asleep, they sat together beneath the oak tree that had witnessed their first declarations of love. The ranch spread out below them, peaceful in the moonlight, the home they had built together, the legacy they would leave to their children. "Happy anniversary, my love," Ethan said, drawing her close. "These 10 years with you have been the best of my life." Abigail leaned into his embrace, contentment washing over her. "And mine," she murmured. "I never imagined such happiness was possible." "Do you remember what I told you that day I lifted you onto my horse in the rain?" Ethan asked, his voice soft with memory. "You told me I was worth helping," Abigail recalled. "That you believed in helping folks when you could," he chuckled. "Well, yes, that too. But later, when we were riding to outrun the storm. Do you remember?" Abigail thought back to that day, the warmth of his body behind hers, the exhilaration of the galloping horse, the whispered words in her ear that she had barely registered at the time. "You called me your world," she said softly, the memory returning with sudden clarity. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining in the moonlight. "I did. I didn't even realize I'd said it aloud until later, but it was true then, and it's even more true now." He took her face in his hands, his touch infinitely tender. "You are my world, Abigail Lawson. You and our children and this life we've built. I thank God every day for bringing you to me." Tears of happiness blurred Abigail's vision. "And I thank him for giving me the courage to trust you," she whispered. "For helping me see that I was never worthless, just waiting for the love that would reveal my true value." Their kiss beneath the oak tree was a renewal of all they had promised each other a decade before, a pledge of continued love, respect, and partnership for all the years to come. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night breeze carried the scent of prairie flowers, Abigail knew with unshakable certainty that she had found her place in the world, not as the worthless girl her father had claimed she was, but as a woman of strength and dignity. A loving wife, a devoted mother, a trusted friend, a valued member of her community, a woman who had journeyed from worthlessness to becoming someone's world, and in doing so had discovered her own worth, had been there all along, just waiting to be recognized and embraced. As they walked hand in hand back to the house where their children slept peacefully, Abigail sent a silent prayer of gratitude to the heavens. for the storm that had led her to shelter, for the cowboy who had seen her value when she couldn't see it herself, and for the love that had transformed them both, making them better together than they could ever have been apart. In the years that followed, their love only deepened. The ranch prospered, their children grew strong and kind, and through all of life's challenges and joys, Ethan and Abigail faced them together, partners in the truest sense of the word. Their story became legend in the Montana Territory, the tale of a woman who thought herself worthless until a cowboy lifted her onto his horse and called her his world. And whenever Abigail found herself beneath the vast Montana sky, riding her black mare alongside her husband, with their ranch stretching out before them and their children growing tall and straight like the mountains on the horizon, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just her worth, but her purpose, her joy, and her home.